So Karen Huger had her sentencing hearing today and unfortunately went into court playing the same tiny violin, basically playing victim. Like this situation was something that happened to her and the judge was not having it, going so far as to completely ignore the prosecution's recommended sentencing of just 6 months prison time and instead gave Karen a full year behind bars. According to What Else Is Going On podcast, who was actually in the courtroom during the hearing, the judge not only called out Karen's years of playing the system, since this was her 4th alcohol-related traffic offense, but he also brought up her behavior on that body cam footage. Because if you remember, the released footage showed over 30 minutes of Karen belittling the officers, telling them that they couldn't tell her what to do, talking about their salaries, asking if they knew who she was, dropping Andy Cohen's name, saying that she was Thomas Jefferson's concubine, and that nothing would happen to her regarding this arrest. She basically showed her entire backside, much like her behavior on Real Housewives of Potomac, where she never took accountability for any of her own bad behavior, but instead pointed the finger at everyone else. It didn't matter if she was caught in a lie or whatever. It was always someone else who had done worse or someone else who had started it, talking over people or taking it to the gutter until people just eventually said, "Whatever, Karen," because they were just too tired to deal with her anymore. And years of that type of behavior spilled over into her real life as well. Because when her 79-year-old husband Ray had the chance to speak on her behalf in court today, in spite of the fact that she had been found guilty and that the prosecution had sufficiently proven to the court that there was no other car involved, and that Karen had instead chosen to drive under the influence, and that she alone was responsible for the single car collision back in March of 2024, a collision that could have been tragic. Now, despite Karen's guilt already being established, in response to whether he was aware of all that Karen had been doing in the last few months to get help, Ray chose to tell the judge that Karen was doing very well and had recovered from the accident, as if this was something that had happened to Karen and not a result of her own decision to drive under the influence, basically feeding into that victim narrative as Karen sat crying in the courtroom. Then, Karen's lawyers asked for a suspended sentence for Karen with 3 years probation while telling the judge that Karen was a good person and had been very gracious through the entire experience. Again, like someone else had brought this situation upon Karen instead of this being the consequences of her own actions. This proved to be just too much for the judge, because he said that not only was Karen filled to the gills with alcohol that night, but also she was no stranger to drinking while driving on their roads. He brought up how after being stopped in 2007, you would think that Karen would have learned her lesson. But in 2008, before the ink was even dry on the previous offense, she was arrested again. The judge said that Karen had gotten the hang of working the system prior to 2011 and that all warnings went in one ear and out the other, but she remained undeterred. The judge then asked, what were they even supposed to wait for? The 5th time before they sentenced her to jail time? And could they even believe that she's only driven while intoxicated 4 times in the last 17 years? Or is it more like she's been very fortunate and her inebriation has gone undetected? That judge was too through, because how many times have you seen a judge's sentence be harsher than the prosecution's recommendation? The prosecution only asked for 6 months, and before Karen opted for a trial, they probably wanted her to do even less time than that. But instead of taking accountability, Karen pushed for a jury trial and spent the entire season of Real Housewives of Potomac declaring her innocence, only for the footage to be leaked during the trial in December where she was found guilty. But then She went on a press tour saying she was disappointed in the jury's verdict and was definitely not an alcoholic. Even as recently as this week, her team was blaming everything from being on pills, past trauma from college, her parents passing, and even blaming the show, saying that it was a lot of pressure having a leadership position on Real Housewives of Potomac. The judge was not buying any of the excuses for Karen disregarding the welfare of others and ended up sentencing her to 2 years prison with a year suspended, meaning she'll just serve a year max. There's also a $2,900 fine. She cannot drive at all for a year after her release. She also received 5 years of supervised probation upon release with interlock, where she has to pass a breathalyzer before her car will even start. And if there are no violations after 3 years of probation, then the remainder will be unsupervised probation. After hearing the sentence, Karen was immediately remanded to custody. And as the guards were escorting her, she screamed out, "Love you, Ray. God's got you. You'll be all right. God bless you." Now, reports are already saying that Karen is planning to make a comeback to reality television after she serves her 1-year jail sentence, because she is determined to turn her life around and get clean to serve as a role model, because everyone loves a success story. Let me know what you think about Karen's sentencing in the comments. Do you think this is the time she needs to finally learn to take accountability for her actions? Remember to like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.